Good morning, Hyderabad. I know this is a day of loaded content, so I took a slightly different approach, and I'm going to talk about some of my GCC life lessons. I got a start to my GCC life 30 years back when I was the CEO of LG Electronics. That was a time when convergence was knocking at the consumer electronics door. Manufacturers like LG realized that consumer electronics is going to be more software than hardware, and they just didn't have the DNA or the capabilities. And one of the solutions that eventually was executed was to establish a capability in Bangalore as an R&D center. If we had done it today, it would be called as a GCC. Those days, it was just another office of LG Electronics. And of course, it ended up being a very successful capability. Today, the same team employs thousands of engineers and almost does everything software for LG. Nothing can be more successful than what LG achieved way back in 1995. In 2000, I joined Fox Television in New York, and that was also the time when AOL bought Time Warner. Nobody expected a company like AOL to go and acquire one of the largest media companies. And encouraged by the purchase of AOL, Jerry Yang, who was the CEO of Yahoo those days, started chasing Rupert Murdoch, who was my manager, to buy News Corporation. And News was a giant, and we huddled up at the headquarters of News Corporation and ultimately decided that all the profits of Titanic would be given away to a team in India that would end up setting a string of GCCs, again, what we would call as GCCs. So there was one for HarperCollins, there was one for Dow Jones, for 20th Century Fox, for Fox. We also ended up setting up a team that eventually would become Tata Sky and would change the landscape of how consumers globally would view, access, and control content. Much of conditional access technologies, as we know today, came out of a GCC that News Corp invested in Bangalore, almost employing 7,000 or 8,000 people. A few years later, Cisco acquired this capability for $7 billion. It was one of the largest acquisition of a GCC that started with a capital of $10 million. And of course, today, conditional access and delivering content through television is an integral part of Cisco's overarching strategy. So these two life experiences, led me towards thinking about, the combination of contextually empowered, motivated employees, that when given the right problems can do magic, right? So the whole notion of GCC was nothing but how do you deliver magic with people when you empower them, integrate them with the organization. And that's how we got started, with Target way back in 2005. And of course, we all know what Target has meant to the industry. So in some ways, Target was, a life-shaping, journey for many of us as we were standing up GCC. So I'm going to talk about some basics that I have experienced in my life. So the first point I want to bring out is the fact that excellence has been since long attained in organizations that have existed, decades back, right? I mean, we talk about how GCCs are coming up the value curve, but there have been a number of companies that have excelled in this game. So going forward, in the years to come, we are going to see a more homogeneous composition of companies, and of course, how they would cast them into certain archetypes that I'm going to talk about, right? So This is a phenomena that has existed for a long period of time, and I would urge many of you who are embarking on this journey to pick up the threads from what excellence really means in the context of these companies. So I want to spend a little bit of time on all the noise that is out there in the market. We are a venture-backed company, and when we started ANSR, I guess 2015 with an investment from Axel Partners, I should tell everybody I used to wake up, to a call from one of the venture partners, how things going. And today we wake up to something that is out there, on the GCCs. So we know that every business out there is now morphing or transforming itself into a GCC business. Anybody who's got any business of any standing is now trying to pivot to a GCC business. And there's lots out there, AI first, AI native, profit center, cost center, maturity frameworks, and we hear a lot. And, rest of my conversation is going to be, what simplicity means and what basics are all about and how important it is to build a strong foundation that we can, build a GCC on. So we've done about 175 plus GCCs, and all of them have been stood up on a very simple foundation of basics. And I want to spend a few minutes just talking about what they really mean. And if you don't have one of these, I would urge you to go back to the drawing board and think about, what you can do to bring in some of these components into your GCC architecture. It all begins with an unwavering commitment and advocacy and sponsorship from the executive leadership. If you don't have it, you're not going to go very far, right? I mean, this is a big deal for any company, and it is important that you start off your GCC journey with the advocacy of the senior-most leaders in the organization. This is a big change. It can derail organizations. It doesn't get accepted well, and therefore the starting point is how the CEO, how the board, how the C-level execs sponsor or advocate for this initiative. The second point is don't overcomplicate the simple. In the word of GCCs, simplicity works. Think about it. All you're trying to do is set up another office of a company. How complex it can be. And companies have been doing this for forever. So when they come to India, we don't have to over-engineer what it would take to establish another location, provide the same brand experience, bring in consistency of policies and processes, create the same office, make sure employees do the same talk, they embrace the culture of the company, and so on, right? So just focus on simplicity. Everything will come after that. The third point is all things talent. The only reason why companies are coming to India is about talent. And then we'll talk about AI, and then we'll talk about innovation and digital transformation. But let's get talent right. And where the industry is today, the GCC talent is talent that is different from the talent that we see in other constituents of the industry. So think about a three-dimensional view of talent in GCCs. Obviously, you need to have superior job-related skills. You do work that is business-facing, that is more complex, that impacts the customer on a day-to-day basis. So you need to be better in your job. And that's the reason why a lot of people are being hired. The second dimension is cultural compatibility. People are not going to be going very far in a GCC if they're culturally not aligned to the company. The knobs don't have a story in a GCC. The knobs are not our brand, right? So focus on hiring people who become the brand of the company. And third, ensuring that people imbibe the leadership expectations of what a company is all about. There's a lot of talk about global talent, right? 6,000 roles, 30,000 roles. India will have 1 million roles by, end of the century and so on. The fact remains, in a GCC, every single role is a global role. The fact that you work for a company and you are not working in the headquarters and you're working in a global location, you are a global role at the junior-most level and as a leader. So therefore, ensure that people are brought up to be global employees of an organization right from the outset. Built for purpose. GCCs are purposeful. And we must never forget the fact that there was a burning platform that a company had, talent scarcity, capability deficit, competency, opportunity, and therefore a GCC is being set up. And we should go out and execute on that mandate. So if we are purposeful, outcomes are going to follow. Culture is the ultimate unique value proposition for any company. Focus on your culture. There's nothing more important, right? So if you build a GCC on the strong foundation of organizational culture, ensuring that everybody takes a sense of pride, there is that belongingness and ownership, good outcomes will follow. The whole notion of integration, think about, how spacecrafts dock into the International Space Station. How GCCs have to tightly couple with the mothership is extremely important. There cannot be anything that falls through the cracks when it comes to, integration of GCCs. There is a tendency, because we see all kinds of GCCs in the market, so a lot of us want to do AI, we want to do digital transformation, we want to start becoming a profit center, start generating a revenue. There's an important notion of ensuring that you don't proclaim independence from the enterprise union, right? What it means is don't detach from what a company is all about. You were sent out for a particular purpose. If you're set up as a customer service center, that is your purpose, that is your mission. You got to drive outcomes that relate to the purpose, and therefore, if you're trying to do anything, you're trying to become independent of the organization, and that becomes an important consideration. I want to talk about an interesting notion of the 11th floor analogy. And this is a conversation with the CEO of a fairly large company. Right now, they have a GCC in Hyderabad, and this company had an office, which was in downtown location, 18 floors, and they were looking at expanding to the 19th floor to bring in some more teams. And I tried my best explaining what a GCC means. It was a very simple concept. It's extension of your team. This is your team. You just won't get it, right? And so finally, being aware of the fact that the company was looking at expanding into the 19th floor, I told him, think about, instead of leasing out 19th floor, invest in the 19th floor in Hyderabad. And that GCC today internally is called the 19th floor, okay? And it's worked out well. It stood the test of the time. He got it immediately. All it meant is you're just having a team that is integrated, that just does work like anybody else in the company. Instead of taking the elevator to the 19th floor, now they take a flight to Hyderabad, right? So just wanted to bring that out because it's the simplicity of that concept that has worked the test of the time. So talking about evolution and maturity, I guess where the market is today is, the whole notion of GCC archetypes. We've started off in many different ways, and eventually the GCCs are manifesting themselves in one of the many archetypes. So the next few years, we will see the incumbents ultimately trying to fit into one of the archetypes. There are a lot of GCCs that are today the second headquarters of the company, Target being one of the GCCs. What it really means is you have global leaders, they have functional responsibilities, they drive business outcomes like anybody else in the company. You have GBSs, shared services centers, centralizing processes, bringing efficiencies, standardization, There's a big difference between GCC and GBSs. You have engineering and product development centers. At some point, you're going to have AI innovation hubs. You're going to have hybrid manifestations. So ultimately, you're going to have GCCs that are going to fit into one of the archetypes. The next point I want to talk about is, having attained acceptability globally around this whole notion of GCCs. We are now getting into an era of leadership, right? And the leadership of the center, the leadership of the leaders, and imbibing the leadership dimensions that companies identify themselves with. For example, influencing without authority. How many of us have thought about how do you establish a GCC and how do you lead a GCC without having the authority? There's a big focus on solid lines, dotted lines, who reports to whom. But ultimately, leadership really means how you're going to exercise influence without authority. Similarly, how do you drive results? How do you communicate effectively? How do you manage stakeholders, right? So the growth of GCCs going forward is going to be all about how do we, transition from executing to playing an important role in the strategy of the enterprise, which means we got to imbibe some of those leadership values. And comes AI. I think we're going to talk a lot about AI. From my perspective, AI is a very robust solution in search of an enterprise problem, right? So the next year or so, we're going to be looking for problems that are going to be a good match to everything AI. So what is not going to work is the legacy way of thinking and how work gets done. And we are embarking on some AI interventions for some of our customers. And what's coming out very clearly is how you first start with reimagining how work gets done, right? So reimagining the future of work is going to be a starting point. Otherwise, the best outcome that you're going to get from AI is possibly what RPA promised to deliver, years back. GCCs, we all know, and this is a big opportunity. I'm sure it's going to be, one of the defining themes for this conference, will emerge as global AI implementation hubs and agentic AI enablers. There's huge opportunity. There's just no talent, although there's a lot in the works in terms of mitigating that talent deficit that exists with AI in some form, right? I mean, this is the, strategy, for example, the current US administration. You be an AI super powerhouse. If you don't have people, have AI sort of come in the way. And some of the AI values, benefits that we need to focus on is labor contraction, labor substitution. We all know, but this is going to be one of the biggest opportunity, productivity amplification, and improving the quality of the work that we do, and of course, redefining the work by itself. Recently we provided a proposal to one of the companies where if human talent was $4,500 a month, now we have the same agents doing the same work at $800 per month. So two things are going to happen. The prices are going to come down, and the GCC industry from here on will be non-linearized from a growth perspective. We have too many people now in the industry. Until yesterday, we were talking about the fact that there is a supply deficit from a talent perspective. The existing people will need to be repurposed to do better work, while the agents and AI in some form will do its work. Again, solution in search of a problem, and the focus has got to be obviously on the right problems coming to the table. Just a few minutes on this whole notion of late mover advantage, specifically for companies that are starting up the GCCs. Don't go through the journey. When we started the GCCs decades back, years back, even 5 years back, we went through a 4-step process: experiment, optimize, scale, and transform. So you went through a journey. It took 5 years, 3 years, 7 years, depending upon the company. Today, the opportunity is to benefit from everything late mover There is talent. All mistakes have been made. You've got to work really hard to mess it up now. So all you need to do is arrive and leapfrog. Land up where a company which has been doing this for 10 years is where today, so you can then start your leapfrogging journey. So if you're going through the same journey that some of the incumbents are doing, you're obviously making a very big mistake. The other point I want to talk about is innovation. There is a lot of clutter on innovation. Innovation is cliche. It means nothing. Think about the fact that how much of innovation is today working for organizations. It is not, and the reason being it is not contextual, it is not purposeful, and it is not aligned to what are some of the burning platforms of a company. So there is work to be done in terms of how do you innovate on innovation to make it more purposeful, to make it more contextual, and to make it more aligned with what a company needs. You cannot be independent of an organization and its problems to make innovation work. Final cautionary words. The concept of a GCC by itself is very divisive. When you are trying to be part of an organization, when you are trying to become mainstream with the rest of the company, you have to be the organization. You cannot be standing out as AI enablers and innovators and transformers and God's gift to the enterprise. Doesn't work. It has to be all about, being part of the organization. And then the work and not talk should do the talking. Okay, thank you very much and enjoy your day. Thank you.